The largest city in Western Mass, Springfield, held its first virtual meeting of the City Council on Monday. I spoke with Council President Justin Hurst about what was on the agenda and what was not.
It went excellent. We actually had a couple meetings prior to that to kind of get the city councilors acclimated with the technology. I actually was very impressed. I was impressed with a variety of different things on their end and just their willingness to try something new. And so, I think they were ahead of the curve. I think the city of Springfield and our city council is ahead of the curve when it comes to actually holding a few meetings beforehand and then our actual official regular city council meeting this past Monday. So I don't think there are too many other cities and municipalities that have done that as of yet. And so we plan on doing more in the future just to kind of give residents an update as to what is happening with respect to COVID-19.
We talked to Congressman Jim McGovern last week, and he's, head of the Rules Committee, as you know, grappling with how to figure out if Congress can meet and vote remotely. And one of the things that he told us was that a challenge is the technological piece. A lot of people on Capitol Hill apparently are still using their flip phones. So clearly Springfield ahead of the curve of what's going on. And do you think that it helps that you have a number of young people on the council who, might already be familiar with using this kind of technology?
I do, but we also, a lot of credit goes out to Focus Springfield, who has kind of been spearheading this technology and helping city councilors get up to speed on this Zoom technology. In addition, our solicitor, Ed Pakula, has also been great in terms of, slowing me down because I'm one of those that want to move fast and want to make sure that we're getting the business of the city done and done in a timely fashion. But at the same time, we need to be diligent and purposeful in terms of what we do and make sure everybody is on the same page. And we also want to make sure that, we're doing it in a way that complies with the new adjustments to the open meeting law.
To your point about open meeting law changes, you actually had to make some adjustments to how City Council runs its meetings. One of the things that had to be, postponed at least temporarily is the public comment session where people come in and raise their concerns, talk to council, bring those things up to them. That's paused for now. How can people raise concerns if they have them?
First of all, they should call the City of Springfield's 311 number. They can call 736-311. But, what we're trying to do for our next meeting is get the public to be able to be involved. They won't be able to actually Zoom in so that they can see us. But the thought process is that they'll be able to call in and then their phone calls will be patched into our Zoom technology. So we'll at least be able to do a public speak out. When it comes to our hearings meetings, it's a little bit more in depth in terms of what it is that needs to happen. And so we are working our way through that right now. We're not sure if the technology that we have is capable of handling that type of a meeting. But we're sure working hard to try and figure out a solution around it.
It's April. Do you remember what you would usually be focusing on at this time of year if we weren't in the midst of this?
It's interesting because there are a lot of things that have been put on hold. We had a short-term rental in which Councilor Jesse Letterman had brought to the forefront that was going to to look into how we handle that issue, which has been an issue in Boston, and in terms of people opening up their houses for guests. To stay for a short period of time. So we were dealing with that. In addition, we were dealing to the BRAVE Act to make sure that our city officials, or not our city officials, but our police and fire received adequate insurance when they were deployed. We had a number of things on the radar that we were dealing with, all that have been put to the back burner, just so we don't overwhelm department heads and we don't overwhelm the city of Springfield as a whole. Everybody's working hard.
But to your point, those were very important issues not so long ago. Are you keeping a running tally of things that you're going to want to revisit when we do come out of this?
So the short answer is yes. I think we need to deal with the here and now. I think people are bleeding out right now. You have people, it's now starting to hit home in terms of people that who are losing their lives or being infected by this virus. And so we need to make sure that we keep those individuals first and foremost on our list. it is imperative and incumbent upon us as elected officials to make sure that that our residents have the resources that they need. I mean, there are so many people who are unemployed right now. There are so many people who are trying to figure out where they can get a meal because they've lost their jobs and how to feed their families. There are children like my own who are at home, who you have parents who are not used to being teachers and having to educate their kids, who are now trying to become makeshift teachers in a time of crisis. And so they need to make sure that they have the resources that they need to homeschool their children. Mental health services need to continue. There are just a whole litany of things that we are dealing with. Our elderly, who are our most vulnerable population. We need to make sure that they're still receiving meals and that they're not as socially isolated as they can be during a time like this, and that folks are still checking in on them. Our homeless, who is another vulnerable population, we need to make sure that we're taking the precautions necessary so they're not hit hard with this virus, which is what is expected. So there are a lot of things that we need to handle now. And so, while those other things were important, I think we all would agree as a body that they need to be put on the back burner right now.
To your point about dealing with the now, we heard Mayor Marty Walsh from Boston this week say there's going to be a curfew in the city of Boston, 9 p.m., you need to be in. Should Springfield have a curfew?
I'll leave that to the mayor. I think the precautions that they're putting in place now have been effective, and if they need to step up their enforcement, then they will.
Have you spoken to Ms. Colton Harris or even grassroots organizers about what's happening in minority communities? We've heard national reports that the coronavirus is hitting minority communities harder than it is the non-white community, the white community rather. Have you heard from those individuals that might be a concern here in Springfield?
It's funny that you say that. I had already read a couple articles in the Boston Globe. And it's very clear to me that we need to make sure that our hospitals are actually tracking the data of the individuals who are coming in and who are being tested and ensuring that information is getting to the state level. There are some reports that are coming out that are fairly disturbing. I think we need to be very vigilant and purposeful in terms of the information that we provide to our residents and making sure those communities where people live very close to each other are receiving the information about social distancing, about ensuring that they wash their hands on a regular basis, about just not going out if you don't have to. The reality is that a lot of these individuals who live in these areas and who have the potential to be decimated by this virus also have to feed their family, and they work in those positions that are considered essential. And, it's unfortunate, it's sad, but we need to make sure that, we're at least acknowledging that is a reality and doing whatever we can in our power to make sure that they have the information to protect themselves as best as possible. And so I have a couple of ideas that I'm going to put forth in a letter to the mayor that I think will help to inform those individual populations who are normally the last to know, just because they don't have access to things like the internet where folks might get this information. And so we need to make sure that we're doing what it is we can, knowing that we are a majority minority city.
What's one of those ideas that you want to outline in that letter you mentioned?
Oh, goodness, you're going to put me on the spot. Well, I tell you what, code enforcement. We use community development block grant money to, in my opinion, over-ticket minority neighborhoods. And so it seems to me that since we just approved a few $1 million in community development block grant money, that all of it doesn't necessarily have to go to businesses, although they need it as well. But we should be spending that money providing overtime, which we would have done to issue tickets, to now inform individuals. And so we should be spending less time as a code enforcement department issuing tickets, since we're not going inside homes. And we should in turn use those resources to make sure that we are educating people in these same neighborhoods that we normally overticket. So for me, it's a perfect opportunity to make amends for what I always have thought was a wrong in the city of Springfield. I think it's great that we have community development block grant money. I think everybody wants to make sure that, they live in an area that is clean. But I've always thought that we've over-ticketed those areas simply because we have the money to do so. Now let's use it in a positive way, or certainly a more positive way. And let's use those same individuals to inform the residents that probably are going to be hit the hardest based off of the research that has become available.
Counselor, I want to shift gears here. Kumari Williams passed away this week, and you said the community lost a role model. I know you're close with the Williams family. What have you been reflecting on this week?
It was just a travesty. I've had conversations. I text back and forth with Representative Williams. I know my father had a conversation with Representative Williams. I also talked to Kumari's sister. We need to keep their family in our prayers and lift them up at this point in time. It is extremely sad. We lost a young man who had so much to give to the city of Springfield and so much to give to the young people who he mentored, who he coached. He was a true leader, and he had so much promise. And so the fact that we lost him at such a young age is just a detriment, and, it'll be a loss that will stick with me forever. But it also shows that, we need to be vigilant right now. We need to be checking in on family members. We need to be resolute. And, we can't take for granted the fact that, we're here. We need to make a difference while we're here. That's something that Kumari did so well. And I hope others follow in his footsteps.